Thank you for joining us on the Education Beat, Evidence to Excellence. Today, we'll be continuing our discussion on career and technical education with our guests, Dr. Bob Couch, retired director of Anderson Institute of Technology for Anderson School Districts 3, 4, and 5, and Dr. Michael E. Lofton, principal of Spring Hill High, Career Pathways Magnet for School Districts 5 of Lexington and Richland counties. Welcome back, and thank you for coming back to continue this conversation with us.
Yeah, no problem. I love it.
Yeah.
I remember when I started my teacher education program back in '92.
Yep.
One of the professors made a statement that kids entering kindergarten that year were ultimately going to take jobs that didn't even exist yet.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that really resonated with me. And I'm struck by the fact that the pace of change is accelerating even more. So how do we prepare students to thrive in such a rapidly changing world with rapidly changing work expectations?
Well, I think, going back to the model that I've used is when you go into the workplace, it's basically problem solving. And it's critical thinking. It's looking at what needs to be done, and if something does not work, problem solving has to occur to create the solution to that. So the way that I structured the learning environment in the two centers that I built is we had a model that basically represents what a master's level or doctoral level student would do. We use that template that defined the problem. Is if you got a problem in engineering and you want to create a solution, then what is the problem? So then you ask questions around that problem is how do you solve it, right?
Well, and what I find really interesting about what you're describing is that in graduate level education, we don't tend to ask a bunch of questions that we already know the answer to.
Right.
Right? We're asking questions that need an answer.
Right, yes.
And so I imagine then the work feels more real to the students as they're engaging in this.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the research model that Michael was talking about, that they use at Spring Hill and that we used, is that it creates this dynamic of whether you're in welding or you're in biomedical sciences, you're going to have to do research. And so every student that I had in both of my schools had to do a capstone project. And you could do it individual as a group. So when I mentioned that to the welding teacher, and they had to follow the same format, the class decided to build an electric vehicle. Now you're thinking in welding, an electric vehicle, how does that connect? Well, it's the frame that they're building and the vehicle they're making, and then they needed engineering to come over and help them develop the electric motor in order to enable that vehicle to move. And they had machine tool involved in making the parts. So that's actually a live situation that you're finding in an environment of the work environment. And our biomedical students, I had two orthopedic surgeons to come in and have a meeting with them about shoulder replacement.
Yeah.
And so we went to Arthrex, brought in people from Arthrex to train our students. And so the machine tool teacher met with the biomed and nursing teachers and created models where they actually then created an environment and had operating tables set up in the center, and we had orthopedic surgeons that came in to watch them do a shoulder replacement in that environment. And when counselors would come in, they would see students in there that they thought would never, ever succeed in school. So it's a matter of having that ownership.
Yeah, 100%. And allowing teachers to be creative,
yeah,
too.
Absolutely.
Because I just thought of, like, one of the things, because it is ever-changing, but I think our kids are very interested in the change. They don't want to be like the old people. They,
Right.
and if we can allow them to be a part of that change, they'll delve right into it. We have a ninth grade pathway program that is highly advanced, and they take physics in ninth grade, which is pretty high level stuff, and then they are in algebra 2. And what those teachers were they combined. So in a traditional school, you may have your math teachers are all in a hallway.
Right.
They teach math.
Yep.
English teachers all in the hallway. We don't have that at all at Spring Hill. So we have all of our halls are divided by academies. And so you're in an academy where you have a math teacher, an English teacher, a science teacher, and they're all within that group. And then they start planning together.
Mm-hmm.
So I had my math teacher, my physics teacher trying to get across the concept, and they're like, let's do this lab. They took the kids up to Topgolf, and it was pretty, of course the kids were like, this is awesome.
Right.
But they had this whole packet of work they had to do. And then, believe it or not, you had kids who didn't know how to play golf, but then once they understood the math and the physics behind it, they were actually doing pretty good. And they're like, it's simple. It's as simple as understanding that. And then you have this whole aha moment that happens with the kids to get them hooked into studying even more. So it's allowing teachers to be creative, but also encouraging cross content areas to blend together. So you're not in isolation. Kids will adapt to the change if they understand the why.
What I love about what you're describing is, and both of you are showing how these different areas are so deeply connected to one another. The math and the science and the English, the engineering and the biomedical. They're by facilitating those connections, it reminds me of the way that the brain learns by making new connections in the brain. So it really does model the process that we want our students to engage in, is to see how these different fields intersect with each other and how they inform one another and begin to operate in that. That's very exciting stuff.
Yeah. We have, and Bob mentioned this too, the different types of classes tend to have different types of kids.
Yes.
And what I love, so 32% of our entire population at Spring Hill has an IEP or a 504, which is a large percentage of students with...
that is a bit higher than average.
Yes. We're almost 40% pupils in poverty. And we look at the learning process doesn't have to happen in a vacuum. So we encourage the kids that we can all learn it. We just need to get to understand the why behind it. And it's that cross-curricular and hopefully some sort, I want to do something like this for a living. And I feel like our kids want to work. They want to make money. They want to provide. They want to give back to society. And so now we're creating these windows for them to see what their future could be like. So then they are hopefully destined to work really hard while they're in school to get to that pathway. I find it fascinating to think it a non-traditional path that for kids, because they are non-traditional. The kids are so different than when I grew up. I mean, and it's really fascinating to have like partnerships with different organizations. I think about biomed kids a lot too. The research that those kids do, it's just unbelievable. And now we're having kids, when Bob opened the center and they graduate from Spring Hill, they are big doctors in the area, and they come back to Spring Hill and they're the ones doing our Academy Day. Hey, if you want to be a surgeon, I graduated from Spring Hill and this is what I do and this is how I did it. And I did the research as a 10th grader, 11th grader, 12th grader. And they're, in my mind, they're still kids, but because they had that ability to find a passion, find their path, and they're allowed to change their ideas and explore different areas. But then that's when they start becoming these unbelievable productive citizens that I'm super proud of.
Oh, yes.
Nice.
Absolutely.
So, Dr. Couch, you mentioned that you had a chance to see some of the best practices in the world and around South Carolina. And what have you seen that's been really effective and notable that you'd like to share with us here today?
Well, if you look at, and again, I think the challenge that we have in South Carolina, it's a national challenge of finding what I would call innovative high schools and centers where the models that we're talking about are actually practiced. Yeah. So when I was looking at the model at Lexington 5, I visited a school in California, in San Diego, and it was at that time one of the most innovative schools. Mm-hmm. A lot of what I saw there is I also brought back in terms of the learning concepts. In Virginia, Thomas Jefferson High School is where I brought the whole concept of being able to do the research that Michael is talking about, of how that you're able to narrow down and do significant research for all students, whether they're AP level or C level students, is that they catch that fire once they see the opportunity.
Once they see how it applies.
How it applies. Yeah. And if you look in South Carolina, there is change. And if you go to Lexington 2, they've got an innovation center. Mm-hmm. You go down to Francis Marion area, there's 7 districts that feed into the innovation center there, Richland 2. So there are examples in South Carolina. I think what surprised me in Lexington 5 is when we put this partnership and concept together, is my last year there, we had 40,000 visitors that came in 4 different countries. College Board sent 3 teams in to see what we were doing. And so
nice.
The idea is that it goes back to Michael's discussion earlier, is that all of a sudden the sort of isolation of CTE and academics goes away when you have this kind of impact in terms of interest on the part of people outside. Right. And we had, I think they toured Michael's place too. We had contingent visitors from Denmark and from Beijing, and we had 2 groups, in fact, came in Beijing to look to see. And what they were looking at is, whereas you're isolated and separated in the educational process by the 10th grade, and you're going to college, you're going to go to work. Well, they came to our schools, and they go back to biomedical, and you've got students speaking Mandarin Chinese, taking biomedical sciences, going to be a doctor, attending academics at Spring Hill and technical. It was amazing to them that you could actually create a system like that. Now, what China has done is they've copied a lot of the innovation in this country and have built an amazing career and technical program throughout their system. Yeah. And they did a lot, and in fact, I sent most of what we were doing and refined it to them as a model for them to use in their secondary program in Beijing.
We had a teacher at Spring Hill because they were there for a long time, interviewing, asking questions, and we had teachers that would go there during the summer and teach English essentially in their school, just as a kind of a side gig during that time too. Yeah. And I would like to add, Dr. Hefner was super innovative in thinking of, well, he recruited Bob in, thank goodness, to help create this, but he did allow us to, because he sent me behind. I was a year behind Bob basically in the building of Spring Hill, and luckily Bob had already carved the way for him to go see some of those innovative schools. Right. And Dr. Hefner then sent me, because I had a year to build Spring Hill and come up with the concepts, and I got to go observe those other schools that were doing really well. Now, I would tell you, I think we dominated those schools. And so we do look at the national rankings of schools and what they're doing. And I think South Carolina is doing really great things.
There's great things happening in our state.
Unbelievable. Yes. I have 2 kids, and I love the fact that they're graduating. One graduated from my high school, the other one's a freshman there, and to see their success. I'm really proud of what South Carolina does with the resources, with what we have. And I do think it's about leadership. It's about finding people like Bob to say, this is what we need to do. This is how we, and being able to have that risk taking to explore those areas for what's best for kids. So we need to keep you going.
So, Dr. Lofton, you no doubt have a ton of success stories that you could call to mind from your time at Spring Hill, from both your students and your teachers. Mm-hmm. I wonder if you could share one or two about which you're most proud.
Oh, well, I would tell you that when we opened the school, we only had 9th and 10th grade students. And so those are young kids, and we opened on a vision. We didn't even have a building at the time when we opened. It was, this is what we can do. Bob allowed me to use his multi-purpose room to do recruiting and different things like that. I would say to have teachers I have a teacher that's been on staff with me for 23 years. She's taught with me for 23 years. A majority of my staff opened the building and they're still with me. Those are things to be very, very proud of. But to see the school, to stick to a vision and to stick through a lot of, like, I would say that sometimes we were kind of getting beat up because it was too, I don't want to say progressive, but it was too far for people to get that weren't as innovative as our kids were.
Didn't fit the model they had in their head.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
And to stick with it and to believe in what we were doing. I've been running the place for 14 years. It's a long time. But when we were able to first have recognition for the success, you had to have a graduation rate. You had to have certain things. So it took us, it was 4 years in before we even got to celebrate publicly, this is what we're doing. Right. So since 2017, like niche.com has ranked us the #1 school in the Midlands. We're the #3 school in the state, behind criteria-based schools. We're an open enrollment. And just to be able to continue to provide that innovative success for the generations of kids we're having coming through now makes me extremely proud. I've had a teacher of the year come out of the building and state teacher of the year, and she was able to tour the state and tell, this is how we need to do it. We need to do that. And it was what we have been able to develop through a vision that we felt that kids could succeed in. So I would say just the continuation success. It wasn't dumb luck. It wasn't like we had just one smart class. It's the pattern of now 14 years of success and 14 years of commitment to being innovative and willing to work within a system and allow creativity for kids to succeed is probably my biggest pride and success of it.
And that is something to be proud of.
Yeah.
So, I'd like to thank Dr. Lofton and Dr. Couch for sharing their time and expertise with us. I'm excited to see what's next for CTE in our state. And that brings us to the end of this season of the Education Beat, Evidence to Excellence. Each episode this year has reminded us of something powerful, that behind every data set is a classroom, a community, and a story worth understanding. Thank you for joining us, whether you've been tuning in on your morning commute, during your planning period, or while unwinding at the end of the day. Your curiosity and commitment to improving education in South Carolina is what makes this work meaningful. Until then, keep asking bold questions, celebrating the big wins and the small wins, and staying connected to the stories that move education forward. And, as always, thank you for all that you do for South Carolina students.